G'day Gear Junkies, Jason here. Let me set the scene. It's 1996 and Boss bring out not one, but two new drive pedals, the PW2 Power Driver and the XT2 Xtortion. These would be two of the shortest lived pedals that they would ever bring out. They were aimed at a very specific style of rock music. But I've always felt as though that these two pedals were Boss's answer to this, the DOD Grunge Pedal, which had come out 3 years earlier. I'm going to go through the background of all three of these pedals later on in this video, but first let's get some sounds. I'm not going to focus too much on the DOD Grunge pedal here because I've done a whole video on this pedal before if you want to check that out. But I will play the first example back to back with all three of them just so you get a bit of an idea of how they sound stacked up against each other. But before I begin, if you enjoy this kind of content, please subscribe, and you can support this channel by going to the Middle Aged Gear Junkie store and buying some merchandise. It really helps. Here's my clean sound. I'm playing my P90 loaded Les Paul going into the clean channel of my Mesa Solo head, and that's going through my 2x12 Joyo cab with vintage 30s. So first up, I'll give you an idea what these pedals actually sound like. I'm going to start with the Power Driver. Straight off the bat, all knobs at noon, that actually sounds pretty good. So the fat control. Yeah, definitely acts as a real thickener, so it's probably a low-end control. The punch. Yeah, as you can hear there, that really scoops it out a bit, so if I turn that back up again. Yeah, it doesn't have a huge amount of top end. That's more mid-range than top end. Now that's not an enormous amount of gain, but I do actually like the way that the fat and the muscle are voiced. I think it's a very musical sound. Here's the Xtortion. So as you can hear, it's very honky sounding, and that's the punch control on this pedal. So as I turn that up, it's going to become even more nasal. Yeah, it's not too nice, is it? Yeah, to me, I think this sounds better with the punch control below halfway. Let's turn up the gain a bit on that. Yeah, it sounds a bit better. Now the contour control. Yeah, Yeah, so that's the shape of your mid-range, whether it's sort of accentuated or scooped. That sounds pretty good with the contour down. It's got more mid-range. If I turn the contour back up again, it becomes really scooped. Because of the extra mid-range on this pedal, I've got a feeling that this is going to sound better with single note lines rather than chords. So I've set both of these pedals up for a decent rhythm sound, and I'm going to play a bunch of well-known riffs from the 90s back to back so that you can hear what they sound like with both pedals. So let's look at the background of these pedals. Grunge was a form of heavy alternative rock that originated in the northwest corner of the USA around the Seattle region. From the mid to late 80s, the Seattle music scene was a bit of a hub for these bands to cut their teeth and explore their sounds. In 1991, Alice in Chains became the first of these bands to have a hit song, which was Man in the Box. This was followed by the compilation album Temple of the Dog. Soundgarden released Bad Motorfinger. Pearl Jam released 10. And Nirvana released their album Nevermind. Nevermind exploded when Smells Like Teen Spirit rocketed to number 1. Elsewhere in the country, you had Smashing Pumpkins with their album Gish. And then early the next year, we also had Stone Temple Pilots with their album Core. Even though these bands are actually quite different from each other, they're all lumped together by the marketing people and labelled as grunge. Now, wanting to capitalize on its popularity, DOD released the Grunge Pedal in 1993. It was designed by a guy called Jason Lamb, and basically it's a modified rat circuit. It's a very, very high gain pedal. Even with the gain down very low, it's still a high gain pedal, a bit like a Metal Zone in that regard. Now, one of the interesting things about it was the way that they labeled the controls. So loud is your volume, butt is your low end, face is your top end, and grunge is the level of distortion. The face, or the top end, is incredibly shrill. It's not a particularly usable pedal. In fact, I don't think any well-known artists ever use this pedal. Kurt Cobain was known to have one on his board, but it was never plugged in, and he was using it to troll fans. Interestingly, a lot of the guitar tones of this time were not overly high gain. They were quite thick sometimes because they used lots of layers, but I wouldn't necessarily call them high gain or metal tones. The grunge pedal here is way higher gain than any of the tones that any of those artists were using at that time. For me, I think this was really aimed at bedroom players so that they could feel as though that they could sound like their heroes. 3 years later, in 1996, Boss bring out the Xtortion and Power Driver. Now, I've always believed that these were brought out in response to the grunge pedal. Now, our first clue is some of the names of the controls. To my knowledge, these names have never been used before or since on a Boss pedal. Now, the Power Driver here was my favorite of the 3. Apparently, this is the closest that Boss have ever gone to making a Big Muff style circuit. It is a bit different from a Big Muff. I mean, it's got the fat control so you can get some really thick bottom end, and it is really thick and woolly like a Big Muff, and it's quite smooth, but the muscle just gives you more mid-range than you would normally get from that really sort of scoop Big Muff sound that you get. I think this sounded really good for some of the examples, particularly Smashing Pumpkins, but for some of the examples, I did actually prefer the Xtortion. Now, I found with this pedal, you've got to run the punch control, or that sort of accentuated mid-range. You need to run that below halfway. Once you get it above halfway, it sounds like I've got a wah pedal on and in a static position, or cocked wah, which I don't really like. It gets really, really nasal. But when you run the punch down a little bit and the contour down, it sounds decent. But yeah, it's for me, it's just another distortion pedal. It's nothing particularly special. I found another clue in the Boss book, which admits that the Xtortion was made for playing grunge and hard rock. One of the interesting aspects about these two pedals is that for me, it marks the first time that Boss were actually following a trend rather than setting a trend. So in the past, for example, Boss created the chorus pedal, and as a result, everybody copied that idea and it became very trendy during the 80s. In this case, they didn't create the trend, they copied somebody else. And the funny thing was that they were very late to the party. I mean, the grunge pedal came out 2 years after grunge really hit the mainstream. These came out 5 years after that, by which time Kurt Cobain was already dead and grunge was on its way out. So it was kind of a dying style at that point in time when these two hit the shelves. And as a result, this went out of production the following year in 1997, and this followed close by, going out of production early in 1998, making these two of the shortest-lived Boss pedals ever made. And it's because of that fact that these are now going for ridiculous prices on the used market. I can kind of understand it a bit for the Power Driver because this is quite a unique and excellent pedal. But the Xtortion here, I think, well, for a collector, yep, this is definitely one you want to get a hold of, but it's not necessarily a great pedal. although it does look really cool. And an interesting thing about it is it's the last new model of Boss pedal to come out to use the colored knobs like this that they used all through the 80s. From this point on, they always went with the black knobs, and the only pedal that would come out with colored knobs in the future would be future iterations of the DD series. When you think about it, Boss didn't even need to make these pedals because they made the original grunge pedals, the DS1 and the DS2, and these pedals were used by people of that era, especially Kurt Cobain. All they had to do was market them at the audience that really wanted to play this style of music. This would have been a lot more cost effective, and they would have been able to do it a lot quicker. They could have done this as early as 1992 and really cashed in on the popularity of grunge at its peak. As always, let me know what you think in the comments. Do you own or have you owned any of these pedals, and what was your experiences with them? I'd be really interested to find out. So if you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, and if you haven't already, please subscribe. You can support this channel by going to the Middle Aged Gear Junkie store and buying some merchandise, and you can also join the Middle Aged Gear Junkie Facebook page. We'd really love to have you. Other than that, my name is Jason. Have a wonderful day. See you later.